Hi, this is Tim of the 1916 Company. Welcome and thanks for logging on. If you love this watch, email me, Team Mosso at the1916company.com for purchase pricing and availability questions concerning this watch. Today, a 2009 model year launch in titanium. It is the Panerai Luminor Daylight chronograph, the PAM00327. 44 millimeters in diameter. It's 16.5 millimeters thick from lug tip to lug tip. Just the case. It measures 53.5 millimeters. If we add the end links to the bracelet, it's got a little bit of flare to it. You can see the total distance across the wrist is a beefy 60.8 millimeters. Now, of course, that's fine because the Daylight series of Panerai watch is inspired by Sylvester Stallone, who has the wrist for it. In fact, it's funny that there's a series of undistinguished 1990s movies that gave rise to highly sought collectible editions. Of course, everyone knows Daylight itself was nothing to speak too highly of in theaters, but the watches purchased by Sylvester Stallone during the production of Daylight in Italy went on to become highly sought collectibles as he gave them to cast, crew, and friends in the process, and Panerai later honoring that association with watches branded Daylight. There was the End of Days associated with the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie of the same name. The less said about the film, the better, but it was one of the all-time great Royal Oak offshore chronographs. And then finally, Batman Forever. Did you see that? No, neither did I, but there's a highly sought JLC Reverso associated with that movie. So this watch right here came a little bit later, obviously, the Daylight name and its Panerai associations living on longer than the movie's relevance. The watch is big, though not too big. As you can see on my wrist, maybe you shouldn't be too scared about the span of the bracelet across the wrist. As you can see, if you just look at the lugs of the watch, they are inboard of the edge of my wrist, and the curve of the bracelet matters too. In fact, the further away from my arm you get, the better it looks. And I do think that a wrist my size could wear this. So if your wrist is 16 centimeters circumference and up, I actually think you've got a match. Now, if your wrist is any smaller than mine, you're going to want to take this off the bracelet and put it on a strap, which is very viable if you are a Paneristi. That said, it's kind of cool to see a Panerai Luminor on a bracelet as it's an unconventional look. So is this full media blasted and brushed aesthetic. All matte finish, very little polish, and that on the edge of the bezel. You could see that the bracelet is integrated into the case, and then the link profile tapers a little bit as we move down towards the clasp. Here we have removable links fixed by screws, and you can see that on both sides. We also have an intermediate sized link in case you find yourself in between sizes. Here's a beefy double folding clasp with twin trigger release. Press both triggers to open it up. Thick gauge, stainless steel swing arm because steel is stronger than titanium. It's used for the mechanical parts of the clasp. Rolling around, you can see this uses Panerai's upscale lug system where you have a little release trigger on the bottom and then you push the bar through. This is more secure than a spring bar system. It's also much more upscale than a spring bar system, and it doesn't force you to risk your talent with a screwdriver against the lugs as you might on a traditional Panerai with screw-fixed bars retaining the strap or bracelet. You can see the Daylight branding on the back. Panerai lays it on thick, but it is a very cool story since Stallone did actually wear those watches unsponsored, and subsequently a lot of his friends in the Hollywood circles of the day wound up wearing Panerai watches, again, unsponsored because they were given as gifts or because they just thought they were cool. And for the most part, that did start with the production of the film Daylight. Now, there's a lot more associated with that story, some of which is baggage and political, but what I told you there more or less approximates the contours of real history. You can see L is the production year here, so 500 pieces for the 2009 model year titanium 100 meter water resistance, and that achieved via the device protecting the crown. Now, if you look carefully, you can see a little innovation that I believe was introduced around 2007 on the Luminors, which is that there's a little bearing called the runner in the cam lobe to make all of this a little bit more refined in action. But still, it's probably the world's most distinctive crown guard structure. Cover up the whole watch. You still know what brand and what model. Now, it has other advantages over regular shouldered crown guards because if you hit it directly, you don't damage the crown. And of course, you have the ability to instantly unlock it. So if your hands are wet, sweaty, or gloves, it can be very easy to just pull up this little lock system, then start winding or start setting the watch. Whereas if you've got a screw down crown, it can be much more difficult to gain purchase on that crown. Another thing important to recognize is that this is a historic Panerai element developed in the late 40s and then brought to production in the early 50s. The idea was back when all the watches were manual wind, continuously threading the stem and the crown in and out to wind and set the watches would wear out the seals. So by only compressing and decompressing, you created a system that was less burdensome on the watertight seals of the watch. So that's what that is all about. Now this is a sporty look. As you can see, it's not a traditional sandwich dial. It's a little bit of a different aesthetic day and night, having a sort of lime green luminova on the metallic blue base with the sunburst center. Really dramatic. Looks great in the dark too, as we've also got the luminescence on sub-registers, particularly the hour counter down at 6 o'clock. And of course, we've got a little date window. Now, this is based on the Valjoux 7753 version of the 7750. The difference is that you rotate the whole thing 90 degrees to create a balanced bilaterally symmetrical dial. Now, you do lose the quickset mechanism when you go from a 7750 to a 53. And so this little trigger here actually adjusts the date. We do have a hacking seconds function. That's activated when you pull the crown out, just like that. And you can see that the watch features a tachymetric scale for gauging the speed of an object, such as a race car, across a kilometer. If you're good with mental decimals, you can use it to gauge the speed of things that are slower, such as runners around a track. Inside the case, we have what Panerai calls the OP12. Now, what is that? Well, it's that Valjoux 7753 in chronometer spec. So the highest grade, 5-position adjusted. The movement is a COSC chronometer. Unidirectional winding, automatic, 46-hour power reserve, 4 hertz beat rate, 25 joules. Chronometer with a combination of a cam-based function cycler for the chronograph, but a very well-adjusted one. This super crisp and positive, and then an oscillating pinion clutch. So you can see it starts without any jump. Even though it's a lateral clutch format, oscillating pinions have very little inherent play, so they are almost always as smooth as a true vertical clutch system and quite seamless in that regard. If you love this watch, that's okay. I won't tell anyone. Daylight, I haven't seen it, you haven't seen it, no cinematic baggage here. Just a cool story about Sly in the 90s and Panerai's undying appreciation for that fortuitous moment in the company's history. So reach out to Team Mosso at the 1916company.com for purchase and pricing details.